Okay, so today we're going to be talking about this guy, which is Fuse Compressor. And this is pretty similar to OTT or multiband dynamics in Ableton, but it was designed to kind of find the middle ground between those two things. And I'm going to go over today like what I like about OTT and multiband dynamics and what I don't like about both of them, and then how this kind of mitigates all of that in one system. And then we're going to make some sounds with it. Um, but more or less, if you know about my process, you know that like abusing OTT is something I like to do a lot. Um, and the reason I like to do it is because it can very easily exaggerate an effect stack below it, and you can get all sorts of interesting artifacts and start being way more destructive than you typically can. Because, for instance, if you do like a 30 dB spike, you have these compressors all pushing the sound back down to normal levels, so you can create resonant peaks in the sound that don't actually overtake the entire sound; they blend back in. Or you can do like reverb tails and all sorts of stuff. And we'll go into this. But out the gate, I want to talk about kind of the different approaches to this setup and the decisions that went into making Fuse Compressor and what sets it apart from these other setups. Because at the end of the day, it's a multi-band compressor. It does a similar thing, but you're going to get a lot more flexibility without sacrificing a lot of the convenience. So without further ado, let's kind of dive into this for a sec. So before we even touch Fuse Compressor, let's look down here at standard multiband dynamics and the way that the OTT preset works. We can actually open up one of the actual OTT presets here. Just drag it in. You can see that basically what they've done is just dragged to create these little gaps in between the upward and downwards compression like this. And then they've created these really intense ratios on all of them that are going to allow it to basically crush the sound down into this tiny dynamic range. And this preset is great, and I love multiband dynamics for a few reasons. First reason being you can actually change the cutoff here, which you can't do in the Xfer one. You just get this exact frequency distribution of low, mid, high in OTT, and there's nothing you can do to actually change it. So that's nice. I also love that I can change the size of these gaps and the thresholds and ratios of each of these 6 compressors. So this gives us a lot of control that OTT obviously doesn't, because again, it's just fixed. You can't change threshold, ratio, anything. You can only move the entire gap. If that makes sense. Like you're moving both the upward and downward compressor at once, and you just have this gap in the middle that you're controlling. And this is powerful for a completely different reason, which is that if I want to do this right here in multiband dynamics, I now have to sit here and like fiddle with both of these slowly and like create this little spot to get it where I want. Whereas when I'm leveling something with OTT, I'm usually just quickly like doot, 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 put it all in and just level it out, maybe do some adjustments on here. So this is way faster, obviously. And this is why I find myself using the Xfer one, isn't because of it being quote unquote better necessarily, but I can just very quickly level things and I don't have to think about it. I can just do that and then close it and go back to making the sound. The other main advantage over the over multiband dynamics that we have in the Xfer one is that the crossovers, because they're fixed, are way cleaner. And there's a lot of, if you look into it, and there's a ton of videos about this on YouTube, about how multiband dynamics does a bunch of weird shit to the phase of your sound. Even just by being on the channel, like it doesn't even need to be doing anything. The split alone does some not so great phase things. I'm kind of the opinion of like, if you're completely destroying the sound anyways, then who cares? But this does have a cleaner sound to it, quote unquote, if that matters to you. But there's this trade-off, right? It's like, okay, well, I have a cleaner sound that's faster to use on Xfer, or I have a slightly phased sound that I have way more control over in multiband dynamics, but it's a pain in the ass to sit here and like try and adjust all of these things individually. So this is like the whole UX behind Fuse Compressor, is kind of trying to combine these two things into one interface. So we have the ability to move the both compressors at once, the gap, like we do in Xfer here. We can just move the whole unit like this. And we can also individually adjust all the threshold ratios like so, just by clicking right on the UI. And then you also have these global knobs down here. So if I want to just change like all of the upwards ratios, I can just slam that. And this is basically like, instead I'd have to do this 1, 2, 3 times, and then get it to the exact same amount. So like doing this on here is a pain in the ass. Doing it in Xfer isn't even a thing. So like we immediately get way more control without sacrificing like having to sit here and tinker with it for ages. Like we can just do it and it's there. So if you want an OTT type sound, a lot of the time what I do when I open this is just kind of max these ratios, and then exactly the same as I would in Xfer is just start moving these around. And then we can, you know, level it. This is essentially the equivalent of these knobs here. I don't really love how this sits over this interface because a lot of times I'll like end up accidentally clicking this. But if you just make sure you're going to the left or right of this little node every time, you're going to end up in this negative space, and you can just drag it exactly like Xfer. So that's huge. But then also we get the crossovers, so we can change where the split is, just like here, and then these are way cleaner than the multiband ones, so it kind of fixes that problem as well. And then of course you get all your standard like attack and release times. You got some knee, some tilt. You can do like channel linking and shit like that. You can also increase the number of bands, which is something we don't get on either of these, so we can have up to 6 bands, and you can see how deep this rabbit hole goes. And then one last feature I want to talk about, and then I'm going to shut up and start actually doing something with it, is the clipper. So this is on all the minimal stuff, but this ends up being really important because the clipper allows us to get in built-in distortion from this. So it actually like saves us some steps of having to do like layered distortion earlier in the chain. So anyways, this just adds a lot of functionality. But it's still quick to use if you want it to be. You can also sit here and tinker with it for ages, obviously, if you really want to. But I've found that it splits the difference between these two plugins very nicely. And I was fortunate enough to be able to work with Minimal on designing this layout so that it does all of these things. And I think the end result is pretty clean, honestly. Like I find myself definitely leaning towards using this over using Xfer or Multiband these days. So with all of that said, I'm going to just kind of close all of this, and then we can sit here and make a sound for a second. So let's even just load in a default operator so we can do this completely from scratch. Turn this up a little bit. And we're going to basically do the like standard. I mean, I've made this type of sound like a million times in other tutorials, but I really want to focus on how we're going to use the compressor. So this first bit is going to be like, you know, just do the same, like add some harmonics, whatever. I'll probably keep that fundamental. Just like make another one. Good enough, just some sort of like messy sound to work with. And then we'll take just the most typical things I would use would be like a reverb and a distortion, and you can have this on either end. Let's try putting the reverb through the distortion though, and then just like low size, low dry wet. Okay, good enough. And then we can of course just start throwing the compressors on now. So I'm going to go back and grab myself a fuse compressor. And again, the default is going to kind of have this more gentle compression, which is not my vibe. Let's just go ahead and max that out. And then we just level this like we would OTT. You can see we're clipping a ton here, so we can just enable this clipper now. And this kind of circumvents a problem where if you just duplicate a ton of these, usually it starts clipping to hell. But now we can actually duplicate this and it won't clip. Let's make sure we're on this new one. We can hear that reverb coming up off of it. Then now we can actually, so another thing in Xfer is you only get the one time knob, but we can independently control the attack and release here. So we can start to see if we can get something a little different by like maxing these. Yeah, now we get like a shorter reverb pull. But if we bring it down, You get that classic like OTT upwards compression. So now that we have this, I mean, and you can do this as many times as you want. Like maybe let's not clip this one. That's the hard clip. Let's go no clip. And then let's just duplicate this one again. All right, sure. Now we can come in and just add like anything we want to the beginning of this chain because it's going to exaggerate everything we do. I mean, listen to that. So let's just take like an EQ to start. This is like the usual, like, okay, now we can take like a 30 dB spike and just send it through. And all of these downward compressors on the top are going to crunch it back into the mix. So let's see how that sounds. Pretty sick. And then of course we can come in here and start like messing with our source patch. Let's put it on like 2 cores. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. We can also just start putting like whatever other effects in here. So let's maybe try like a frequency shifter or something. We can just like drop the mix. And then if you wanted to go back into these, now you can start thinking. So like the last one in the chain is probably going to have the most effects, but we can start thinking about like different ways we can. Maybe add some more bands and start playing with the, so like the adaptive time, if you turn this all the way up, it's going to skew the times so that the lower bands are, well, let's look at the tooltip. So if you have this on, it'll allow you to get this little pop up for everything. I believe this will stagger, so the lower ones are faster. Higher frequencies will respond faster. So positive value, it means that these ones will get lower attack and release times, and these ones will get longer. And then backwards means that the lower ones get the faster attack and release. It's just flipped. But yeah, now we can go in and we can start like really shaping the character. Take the amp off. Like we're just getting so much distortion from this built-in clipping. We can also try unclipping it. So again, you get 2 clippers. The purple's soft, orange is hard clip. Turn that off. Now we can, it's gonna, be clipping a lot. So we can just kind of level it out. And then we can go back to the classic, like give it a glue compressor if we really want to. So we can hear like the, instead of the internal clipping of this, just kind of compress it out. And then we can even start, so like, especially once we have like some distortion and stuff. So let's just like duplicate this distortion over here. And then we can take our source sound and we can even like eliminate all of the high end out of it. So let's try that. Let's just bring like this filter down. Jesus Christ. But yeah, you could see how you could really just like throw any sound under this. It doesn't really matter what it is. So like we could change this into like some sort of like pluck with a ton of release. Oh God. And then we gotta bring the filter up. Let's try band pass. Let's add an envelope to this. Anyways, hopefully you get the idea. This thing is insane and offers basically everything you already got out of these two other things, combines all the functionality of them, and then just adds some more shit. So, yeah, nothing to lose on this. And then worth noting, all of these things can be automated. So you can like automate all of the ratios at once or like all of the thresholds at once even. You can automate the tilt, and the tilt just is like a high-low. Sorry, I could play with this thing all day. You get the idea though. I love this thing and I was fortunate enough to get to help work on the design. So it's all like, you know, this is what I would do if I were to try and make an OTT thing. But I definitely can't code. So bless the Minimal guys. Thanks for making this shit. I think it's awesome. I think it's going to integrate into their future products in a really crazy way that I can't really talk about yet. But it all makes sense. And I couldn't be happier with this. And I think Minimal deserves all the support in the world. They're great devs. It's awesome working with them. And yeah, you should go check their shit out. Get the Compressor and keep your eyes peeled for what is coming soon in the future. Until next time, guys. Appreciate it.